Good evening. Welcome to the Film Society of Lincoln Center and this week-long retrospective of the Australian film revival of the 1970s. My name is Scott Foundas. I'm the film critic for The Village Voice, the former associate program director here, and I want to just say a few thanks again to the various people and organizations who were so instrumental in making this series possible, including the Australian Consul General in New York, the National Film and Sound Archive in Australia, which provided most of the prints for this series, and two of our most generous benefactors here at the Film Society, who I see seated in the audience tonight, Chris and Francesca Beale, who were complicit in concocting this idea for an Australian film retrospective with me several years ago. So we're very happy to finally have it and to have a number of the filmmakers who were an important part of this this very remarkable moment in world cinema here to talk about their work, including tonight's filmmaker, who I'm about to introduce, who was a very important part of the Australian film revival, first as a critic and then as a filmmaker with movies like Between Wars and tonight's film, the FJ Holden, which I find to be just a very special and touching and honest film about first loves, first cars, other things that happen at that impressionable age. And it's a great pleasure to have the filmmaker here. Please welcome director Michael Thornhill.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm not going to say much now because I hope you enjoy the film. If you don't, that's fine too. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you have once the film's over. I'm not going to see it again because I've seen it about 40 times. So you can understand I'm going across to the Lincoln Centre to have a glass of wine while you guys watch the film. But it's the one thing I want to leave one thought in your minds. The film was, many academic critics called it social realism. In my opinion, nothing is further from the truth. And I'll go into that in more detail later. Thank you.
Please stay for the Q&A with Michael and my colleague Isa Cucinotta after the screening.
So thank you for coming all this way to spend some time with us tonight.
You're welcome.
The film is very openly and honestly shot or portrayed, and to me it does seem very realistic. So why, I have to ask, do you object to the term of social realism?
Well, as a departing audience member just said, that was a lot to do about nothing. So my feeling is that, or my instinct is that in reality, at the time, there was huge youth unemployment. Kids were sticking up pharmacies. There was a whole lot of sociology going on that is nowhere in the film. So the film is, to me, a poetic view of a number of icons or characters, for the want of a better term. So I don't think it's particularly realistic. I think it's an imaginary, poetic interpretation of reality.
Well, the characters were very sympathetically portrayed. They're very sympathetically portrayed. They're very, if they are bad in any way, they're really quite sweet and good, actually. Are they at all reminiscent of your experiences growing up?
Absolutely not.
Were you among the crowd holding up pharmacies and making trouble?
I was basically a lower middle class thug that was interested in aesthetics.
So when did you start making movies?
I don't answer facts, God. I can't remember, but you know, I made some short. Everyone goes through the same thing. They either make commercials or music videos or shorts. You know. So I made some shorts.
Well, tell us a little about your actors. They did a wonderful job, and they were obviously young people. Were they new to acting? How did you find them?
Well, first of all, you have a casting director that helps. So it's not a one-man band situation or one-person band situation. There are a couple of professional actors in amongst a whole bunch of talented amateurs. All the parents were stand-up comedians and none of them were drama actors.
The parents were stand-up comedians?
Correct.
Oh, that's great. Would anyone like to ask a question? Yes, sir. He says, noting the P tags for the car, that's unique to Australia. Can you explain it to the American audience?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I do understand the question now. It's just a provisional driver's license for young people under 18.
So your character was under 18?
Well, I can't remember, but we just
well,
you make it up as you go along.
All right. Okay. Anyone else? Nope. Yes, sir.
One of the reasons why I think it plays as realism, to me anyway, is because around the same time in America, there were lots of American graffiti rip-offs where you had the kids causing property damage, causing damage to police cars, really doing criminal acts, and they completely get away with it. There's no indication that the police had the power to do anything but look like buffoons. And this seemed more like you wouldn't do that sort of thing. You were a little more mature, if I may say so. It felt realistic in that way.
Well, there's realism and realism. You are making a sociological comment or analysis or comparison between different cultures, and that's totally legitimate from an audience or critical point of view. I have an anecdote of my own to tell. I've only heard this on the grapevine, but John Milius showed George Lucas FJ Holden and said that's what American Graffiti should have been like. I'm not saying that's true, but that's what I was told.
Yes, again, sir.
Was it FJ Holden, an automobile that Australia made?
I've been expecting this question for 35 years. Fundamentally, the FJ Holden was a car designed and produced by a General Motors subsidiary called General Motors Holden, and the first models of the FJ Holden were basically a smaller version of a Chevy.
Your scriptwriter was Terry Larson. Did you work collaboratively with him, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we wrote the scenario together and he wrote the dialogue. He was a poet, fundamentally, and to be blunt about it, he sat on the floor smoking marijuana while I sat at the typewriter in a pre-computer age and wrote the scene breakdown. And then I would say, what would this character say to that character? And he'd do it extemporaneously. So that's basically, so in other words, we're co-scenario writers, and I took an adaptation credit, and he wrote the dialogue.
Well, it does come across very naturally, so.
Sorry?
It did come across the dialogue was very natural and.
Yeah. I mean, to answer a previous, or to enlarge on a previous question, I suppose the person who most influenced me was a young French filmmaker in the 30s who died very young, Jean Vigo. And that would be my role model. And so it's kind of poetic interpretation of reality rather than psychological and sociological documentation.
Sir, do you have a question?
On a broader subject, it seems to have been a special time in Australia, its breakthrough into world awareness. Was there something special that you recall about Australia that may be different from today?
Could you
He's saying the gentleman is saying there's something. It seems to have been a special time in Australia, a breakthrough time as far as the films.
You know, the great breakthrough of world awareness of Australian cinema.
Of Australian cinema. So, was there? And your final question was?
The question was in your recollection, was there something particularly
Oh yeah.
conducive to creativity in Australia at that time?
Yeah. Was there something conducive to creativity in Australia at that time? Something
there
happening?
sure as hell was. The Hollywood companies owned one of the major exhibition. 20th Century Fox owned one of the major exhibition chains, and the other one was 50% owned by the Rank organisation in the UK. And filmmakers were facing a vertically integrated monopoly, or duopoly, or triopoly. So basically, it was a reaction. There was a political campaign by filmmakers and others of their supporters to attack the vertically integrated distribution and exhibition situation. So it was a political campaign to be able to make films ourselves.
And where did they get the funding from?
50% from government agencies and 50% private.
Well, the Australian New Wave is characterized by a lot of to my mind, very different styles. Your film is one. A Picnic at Hanging Rock is another, or Mad Max, of course, very, very different. How would you define sort of the Australian New Wave? How do you tie all these different styles sort of together?
Look, the Australian New Wave is your invention, not mine.
Okay.
I think it's a load of bollocks, but you know, I don't think there is an Australian New Wave. I think that there are many different styles of films. For instance, Picnic at Hanging Rock is based on a Marxist fairy tale, a novel by Joan Lindsay, and what Peter Weir did, and the scriptwriter faithfully reproduced a Marxist class driven and ridden thing based on the novel, and Peter Weir stripped all that out of it and turned it into a whimsical fantasy. And that's why it sort of, I think it worked.
Right there, please. How widely was the film shown, and what was the audience response in Australia and overseas?
It had a fairly wide release, had a lot of censorship problems, with conservative states demanding a more severe censorship classification than the two major states. The film was not a huge success, but nor was it a failure. It's one of those few films that is a break-even situation, so therefore it found an audience sufficient to work without being a tearaway success.
And did the actors who played Anne and Kevin, did they go on to make more films?
No, they didn't. They didn't.
I'm surprised. They were quite good.
Well, I mean, there's a reason for that, that sometimes actors or potential actors fit a particular project like a glove, and then they have to do a attempt in casting sessions to do a creative interpretation of another character, and it doesn't work for them.
Yes.
There is one player in the film, at least, that I recognize from quite a number of
I can't, because she was a professional actor, although this was her first, shall we say, major film role, but she'd done a bit of television. I think that she's been very successful in miniseries rather than movies, and that may say something about her persona.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Yes, back there.
How's the film viewed for posterity in Australia? Does it have a cult following? And also the soundtrack, it seemed like it was native Australian, but very much influenced by the then current American rock.
How is the film viewed today in Australia? Has become a sort of a cult film? And also, if you could comment on the soundtrack, though it's very Australian, it seems influenced by American rock and roll.
I deny it was influenced by American films in any manner, shape or form.
No, I meant the music, the soundtrack.
I know you meant the music, and I say the music was not influenced by American soundtracks in any manner, shape or form.
And how's is the film perceived today in Australia?
It's basically an archival piece, but it continually plays on cable TV and that sort of thing.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more, if anyone would like to get the last question in. Yes.
I noticed that the film was in surround sound at a time when there were very few. Did this happen in post-production, or was there someone enthusiastic about it during production?
This is one of those put Dracula in charge of the blood bank questions. I think it's an extremely perceptive question, because the phony 2-track stereo was done 20 years later.
Okay, thank you very much for coming, and thank you
Thank you.
for being here tonight.
Thank you.